this whole intersection of politics versus politics and the military actually became a really big, visible issue for India with General VK Singh. In India, a country like India where politicians like interfering with every damn thing, chiefs have to function in the most professional manner despite overt political interference in all kinds of things. UPA, NDA, doesn't matter. You remember it correctly, it was a full front page story by Shekhar Gupta and his team of Ritu Sarin, etc. First of all, these are people who've been former colleagues. Shekhar Gupta was my former boss. All absolutely top-class journalists, Ritu Sarin and the others who had a byline in that story. Shekhar Gupta, of course, took the lead byline because he knew that the kind of heat that the story is going to generate. So he very, gallantly took the sole byline. But there were other people whose names were also attached to that story. Now, VK Singh, General VK Singh, and justifiably so, was furious.
Hello and welcome to the 17th episode of Inner Defense. The election season is hotting up, and who would have thought that right in the middle of the election season we'll have something to discuss on Inner Defense to do with politics and to do with elections. Hey Shiv, what's up? How are you?
The intersection of war and politics is always full of masala. So I'm glad that someone has obliged us with a very juicy topic this week.
Yeah, juicy like you said. I think this episode is going to be a lot of fun.
And it's going to get us into a bit of trouble, but that's okay. Actually, we got into trouble with the Chinese with our last episode, so I think we can handle a few politicians.
And you were in trouble with I think the entire community of Air Force pilots because of your preference for naval aviators over Air Force pilots.
Absolutely.
That reel, by the way, is still going viral on Instagram.
It's still going viral. Not only that, and I'd like to tell all of our listeners and viewers that all of our episodes, are listened to by like millions of people. But apart from that, the episode where we talked about the security at the Jamnagar airport.
Oh, yes.
That one, the naval pilots versus Air Force pilots. The entire communities are still like having big WhatsApp wars over them. So,
in fact, the Jamnagar one, I think one of our colleagues, someone who works in the TV department with you, I forgot his name right now. I met him in the gym a few days ago. He told me, so he was in Jamnagar for a shoot with an interview with Anand Ambani. And while he was walking from the terminal to the airplane, he said it was a long walk. So he was getting kind of bored, and being a production guy, he was like, okay, let me
pulled out his
phone to shoot a slow-mo video, and suddenly he had like two cops on him, like, sir, kya kar rahe ho, high security, etc. So they asked him to delete the video, and he is on your show's WhatsApp group, 5 Live, and he said while he was in the process of deleting it, some image on 5 Live, the WhatsApp group, had a photo of a gun, and the cops were like, sir, aap kya karte ho?
If people see the 5 Live group, they're gonna definitely land themselves in jail. Believe me, all sorts of stuff happens on that group. So,
right. So what are we discussing this week? We are discussing the concept, the idea of military officers, retired military officers joining politics, joining political parties, being part of government. One of the greatest examples in India is of former Army Chief General VK Singh, who not only joined the BJP but also went on to have a union minister's post.
Yeah.
We'll come to him later because he is quite the controversial fellow. We'll come to him later. But the reason we're talking about this idea and this topic today is the fact that former Air Force Chief Rakesh Kumar Singh Bhadauria has joined the BJP. It happened, I think, 2-3 days ago.
Yeah.
We don't know yet whether he'll be contesting the upcoming Lok Sabha elections, but you can more or less take that for granted that he probably will. Or if he doesn't, then he'll play some role in the future government if the BJP comes back to power. Right off the bat, Shiv, I want your thoughts first on the idea of military officers joining politics. While doing my research, I saw that in India, it's still a very sort of a rare occurrence, while in the US it's quite common actually to have your top ministers, what they call secretaries over there, and other parts of your government filled with retired military officers, but also because of the fact that I think US also has a large base of retired military officers, because of the fact that conscription was a very real thing during the Vietnam War, which is the generation kind of in office right now. So that aside, your idea on that, because it does obviously the optics of it. See, I'll tell you my thoughts. I think there's nothing wrong with it because you're serving the nation in just yet another form, right? But the optics of it, especially with what happened with some chatter here and there about former Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria's entry into the BJP, is that he played a leading role during the Rafale negotiations. The Rafale deal has been controversial, even though there's not been any proof in a court of law to show any sort of corruption involved. But yeah, he led the negotiation, and I think, in fact, the 8 twin-seater Rafale fighter jets, which are for training purposes, they are named after, not named per se, that the tail numbers
RB.
are RB, yeah. The others, Rafale, I think BS, for BS Dhanova, the Air Force chief who was before him. So obviously the optics of it look a bit, देखो तुमने Rafale deal दिलवा दिया government को, तुमने उनका काम करवा दिया, अब तुमको BJP से ticket मिलने वाला है. Long-winded question, but yeah, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so right off the bat, they've to differentiate between the US and India, that's apples and oranges. The reason is because the United States is a highly militarized society. Like you said, there was conscription, and a vast number of politicians have been in the military. Now, what we are talking about much more on this episode, of course, is senior commanders.
Yep.
Once they retire at the peak of their careers and then joining politics, like General David Petraeus in the United States, Dwight Eisenhower, who was the US Army general who became president. There are very many, even now there are very many officers of government and secretaries, etc., in the US administration who have had military service. George W. Bush was, in the Texas National Guard and things like that. So that's a different thing, because like in Israel. Look at Israel. Every politician has had to go through the military, so everyone is basically from the military. But that's a separate situation. India is a completely place where you can't compare with those, because here you don't have conscription. You are not a militarized society. You have not been a war-fighting country. In the same paradigm as the United States or Russia or Israel are considered, even though we've fought so many wars. So the sort of intersection between the military and politics in terms of people crossing over has actually very few examples. Now, I'd like to make a distinction before I come. Obviously, like you rightly said, Dave, the reason why we're talking about this fairly touchy topic is because Air Chief Marshal Rakesh Bhadauria, former chief of the air staff, he was the chief of the air staff between 2019 and 21, has officially joined the BJP. Now, two things. Right at the start of this episode, I want to make one distinction. One is, there have been numerous occasions, Dave, when generals or admirals or whatever have retired from service and come into government service in the form of governors,
yes,
in the form of high commissioners, in the form of ambassadors, members of national security boards, governing body of some college somewhere.
PSUs.
From small to big, that is very, very common and continues even now. Like, for example, JJ Singh, Army Chief General JJ Singh, when he retired, he became governor of Arunachal Pradesh. General Dalbir Singh Suhag, a few years after retiring, he was sent as High Commissioner to Seychelles. Admiral Suresh Mehta, Navy Chief, went to New Zealand as High Commissioner. So those examples, and even if you go back to the 70s and 80s, 60s also, people who retired, General Sri Ganesh, Field Marshal Cariappa, people like that, they have had stints as, diplomatic stints post. But in none of those examples did any of those individuals join a party. Now, joining a party is a completely separate thing. Now, you can get a government job. It's called a post-retirement government job. It's a different thing from joining a party. When you join a party, you like you saw Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria wearing the saffron scarf. Now, that's where that intersection becomes a little controversial, becomes a little contentious. Now, Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria is a stand-up guy. Clean record, tough fighter pilot, all the credentials of a good soldier, very, very gung-ho. Ironically, despite all this dirt being thrown on him as far as Rafale is concerned, and he's very capable of taking on those questions himself. He doesn't need anyone to defend him, but he's actually one of India's biggest advocates of Make in India.
Okay.
The Tejas has no bigger proponent and advocate than him. He's the guy who started the whole we must put our emphasis behind the Tejas. Now, why would a guy who's got his hands in a Rafale deal want the Tejas? He probably want more Rafales, right? Anyway, those are things I don't want to go into. But the fact is, this is a democracy, and people are fully entitled to point fingers at him and ask questions. And I am one of the people who always believes that nobody is beyond questioning in such things. Now he's joined the BJP, so he's in many ways now exposed himself to more questions. As an air chief, there's a certain amount of stature, even though you can face questions. But now that you're a neta, now to full-fledged, you are a target now for questions, which is absolutely appropriate in any democracy. Now, this whole intersection of politics versus politics and the military actually became a really big, visible issue for India with General VK Singh. Now, the problem there was his political career with the BJP started after what was a very public confrontation with the UPA government between 2011-2012 over his age issue. It was I was a young defense correspondent at that time, and I can tell you, Dev, it was unbelievable for all of us to see. And for me, it was unbelievable. I can't imagine how it was for like veteran defense correspondents watching a sitting army chief drag his own government to the Supreme Court over papers over his age, which would have meant him serving for a year longer. That's all. That was the only implication, really. And he lost the case. Nothing really happened. The Supreme Court refused to intervene, and the government got its way. But and 2 years later, he retired in 2012. He joined the BJP in 2014 before the elections, and then he became a minister, as you saw. Now, that whole drama was that first visible for this generation, that crossing over of a person who's been the chief, not a major general, not a lieutenant general, not a 2-star, but a 4-star general, taking off his uniform and joining a political party. Of course, after a cooling off period, etc. But especially for VK Singh critics, it didn't leave a good taste in the mouth because it seemed to confirm their biases against him. They said, see, dekha, I told you, ye to BJP ka aadmi tha. When he was in service also, he must have been taking the BJP's orders. That's why he went against the UPA. So that's what VK Singh critics were. Now, let me tell you that VK Singh is, again, like Bhadauria, a stand-up guy. There's no chief in India who is not absolutely worthy of being the chief. Okay? Let me say this with absolute bluntness that in India, a country like India where politicians like interfering with every damn thing, chiefs have to function in the most professional manner despite overt political interference in all kinds of things. UPA, India, doesn't matter. There will always be government control over certain things, including the military. So hats off to all chiefs for the way they manage things. Now, to answer your question about optics, it is uncomfortable. The optics are always going to be uncomfortable because it's one thing for officers, generals, admirals, air chiefs to have government jobs or be given certain assignments or roles after they retire, because they retire when they're in their early 60s, which means they've got a lot of fuel left in the tank, to offer the nation after heading a service that is of 400,000 people. You clearly have a great amount of administrative contribution to make to the country, in public life. And that's why I don't think there's anything wrong with someone, joining public life in this manner. But it will open you to questions. There is no question about it. Will Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria get a Lok Sabha ticket? Frankly, I never want to get into the game of tickets and seat distribution because we've seen how the BJP is with these things. The last thing you expect will actually turn up happening. So let's not get into seats, etc. The fact is he's joined the BJP now and he's going to have to face all of those questions.
Right. So, extending that thought, I'm glad you brought up the topic of General VK Singh because that was going to be my second point of discussion. But so kind of taking that point a bit forward. Okay, fine. You've joined politics. You've joined a political party. The party that you've chosen has come to power, and now you're also in the government. Was it a bit surprising for you to see that General VK Singh? Because I was a bit naive back then. Obviously, I was quite young in 2014. But for me, it was like he would sure, automatic choice to be the Minister of Defense then, right? Because who better to take over the Ministry of Defense than somebody who's been in the force for 20, 25, 30 years and knows the system in and out. He's worked with the bureaucrats of the ministry. He's worked with his army. He's worked with colleagues from the Air Force and from the Navy. So this guy would be perfect for that role. And 10 years of this government, and no, he's not been given, or he's not in charge of anything to do with the world of defense. I'm not talking about him specifically. Wouldn't that be the most logical choice? Where do you see why did that not happen?
Very good question, and it has a very very reasoned answer. The reason why a General VK Singh, after retirement and joining the BJP, winning elections, was not made defense minister and not put there is because he had just come out of there. It would be a total conflict of interest. He knew everyone there. The people he was reporting to earlier in the bureaucracy would now be reporting to him. Those roles would have all been changed. He would be presiding over a system that he was reporting to earlier. Those dynamics would still be there, and therefore he had a troubled exit from the army and retirement, with that same system which was still very much there, the bureaucracy, etc. And therefore, would there be some frictions, and it would be a conflict of interest as an army chief who was governed by the Ministry of Defense to become the defense minister so soon after your retirement would have been highly frowned upon. So I don't think anyone was really surprised that he was not allowed anywhere near the defense ministry. And I don't mean that in an impolite way. I just mean that it would have been seen as a conflict and a possible source of certain frictions. The critics of VK Singh would have said, he would have had scores to settle. He would have had powers over the army. He would have had powers over the military, where people were trying to, had things against him when he was in service, and therefore he would have had powers to, do those things or be in a position to settle scores, which he should not be. And therefore there was absolutely nothing seen as out of the ordinary in him not being given any job in the defense ministry. However, that doesn't mean he wasn't given an important role which had a military element to it. Because remember that when you are an army chief, you are a man presiding over a human power of 1.2 million. 1.2 million people are on your watch, which means you have, even compared to the Indian Railway, you've got unparalleled HR, planning, organizational and administrative skills and decision-making skills. So they put him in the MEA. When he joined, if you remember, I think he was briefly with the Commerce Ministry, and then he was his most visible stint was as MOS in the External Affairs Ministry under Sushma Swaraj when she was alive. And his role was the Indian diaspora. Wherever the Indian diaspora is in trouble, General VK Singh is the man who will preside over the rescue modalities and dynamics. His golden moment was the rescue from Yemen.
Yes.
During the big civil war that happened in Yemen, when thousands of Indians had to be rescued from there. It was General VK Singh who was the sort of knight in shining armor for those Indians, who administrated all those naval ships, etc., and brought all those millions of people back. And I think thousands of people back. And I think all of those people who were rescued owe a great deal to him. But again, like I said, the fact is, when someone comes out of the military, you do want to take the best of their skills, their abilities, what they have to offer in public life. But it shouldn't be too close to where they were. It shouldn't be close to a place where, things haven't settled just yet, etc. You know what I mean? Because and it's not because General VK Singh went to war with the UPA government or because there was friction. It's just simply a conflict of interest. That's all.
Yeah. So let's briefly talk about how political really are military officers. I don't know if I've discussed this on the season 2 of In Our Defense, but I did mention this in season 1. I actually gave an SSB interview. And during the interview, the actual interview, SSB interview is a 5-day process. There's also different elements. One is an actual interview with an interviewing officer. I was asked a very politically loaded question, I remember. And me being the son of a journalist, I gave a very politically loaded answer. And I still feel to this date that I think that answer was perhaps one of the reasons I did not end up clearing the 5-day interview at the SSB. Anyway, that's an aside. The point I'm raising is, I picture this scene from the movie Laksh. I don't know if you can recall it, when Karan Shergill, the newly inducted lieutenant, is being... he's with the officers in the mess. They're having an evening drink, and I think on the TV they show the moment when Vajpayee and Musharraf signed the infamous Agra Agreement. I forgot what the dialogues were, but I imagine the situation in any mess of India. You'll have the officers winding down after a hard day's work, and they'll be seeing what was happening on TV. I'm pretty sure they have some opinions. I'm pretty sure they have some commentary, and I'm pretty sure that army mess halls are one of the most political environment, so to speak. One, that, and second, I've heard from Abhishek Bhalla, who was on season 1 of In Our Defense, that when it comes to gossiping, when it comes to talking politics about military stuff, like postings, for example, who gets to be the chief, or etc., stuff like that, military guys are right at it. So can you confirm the second, and can you tell us a bit more about the first, of how political are military officers when it comes to stuff like this?
Now I want to differentiate first of all between being politically aware, having political opinions, and whether the military is politicized. They are two completely different things. Let's remember that not only in our hyper-connected age right now, where a soldier in Siachen has access to 4G and live news and is completely connected to everything that's happening in the rest of the world. But from the 70s, 80s, there's the big wars, and when the military became a kind of household thing post the 60s. The military has always been politically aware. Soldiers, officers have always been politically aware, and the reason is not some sensational reason. The reason is because they are citizens of the country. They are voters of the country. Soldiers also vote. Who is their MP or MLA matters to them as families. Think of it as soldiers. Don't think of it as elite officers. Think of it as soldiers. It matters to them and to their families who the MP, the MLA, etc. is. So they can have their political likes and dislikes. But are they politicized? The Indian Armed Forces are most definitely not, because the structures in place in our military are so strong, so time-tested. The architecture of professionalism within the armed forces are so rigid that there is no scope for politicization. The sense of fraternity, the sense of chain of command, the sense of obedience, the sense of reliance on training, the sense of purpose, the sense of focus, the sense of reliance on operations is so overwhelming in the armed forces, and I'm sure this is true of many armed forces across the world, that individual political likes or dislikes, it kind of dissipates across the entire mass of the armed forces. You can have a battalion where 3-4 guys like Congress, 4-5 guys like BJP. Some people don't give a damn. Some people say, "Nahin, we want the communists to come back and rule India." It makes no difference. They're war fighters. They're there for a certain purpose. So if you kind of scale that small little analogy across the entire armed forces, individual political opinions don't matter. It's a different thing when you talk about politicization at the leadership level. Are they politicized there? With the VK Singh and the Bhadauria examples, people will say, if the general and the air chief have joined the BJP just a couple of years after their retirement, doesn't this show that they were friendly to the government when they were in service? VK Singh, of course, was a chief under the UPA government, so that becomes a little bit more complicated, even though there are allegations there also, which he has faced very fiercely. And with Air Chief Bhadauria, the same questions will come, like the example of the Rafale allegations that you just enunciated. So this kind of thing will continue, and it will keep going. But I wanted to give you an example of how the promotion system within the armed forces. And we've actually spoken about this in a previous episode on General Bipin Rawat.
Yes.
The promotion system, or at least has been for a very long time, a fairly predictable system. There are very few criteria towards the end that you can be promoted on, which is residual service and your fitness to be promoted to either a lieutenant general or a general, and equivalents in the army, in the Navy and the Air Force. So just by a sheer calculation, most people would be able to tell कि कौन chief बनेगा. इस vacancy में इसको मिलेगा northern commander. You could literally draw a map for who the next 5 chiefs would be. You could practically draw a map, well, not 5, but maybe the next 2 chiefs would be. You could draw a map and do it. Now, General Bipin Rawat was not the first selection as army chief, superseding, overriding 2 others who were senior to him. It's happened before with General Vaidya under Indira Gandhi. And there have been a couple of other appointments, which are not at the chief level, but there have been other appointments where it has happened. But what the Bipin Rawat selection did, the kind of in our age, the message it kind of sent out, and this is a view from a civilian side, and many military persons will agree with me, is that they said that the top job is up for grabs. Means system pe rely nahi karenge. It's up for grabs, as in that, yes, of course, and remember, none of this is illegal. Whoever the government appoints as the army chief is totally fine. There's no rule that says, no, you have to rely on seniority principle. The government can handpick your chief as the executive authority of the country. But so far, that system has not been followed. Now that you do this handpick, now after Bipin Rawat, then it's gone on the seniority principle. They haven't messed around with it. So now there's a kind of suspense. Will it be seniority or will it be handpicked? So if you're the senior most, you may be superseded for someone else. Then what enters the conversation is, because that person is, has lined up all his ducks in a row for the government, to use a safe metaphor, and not get me into trouble with current generals and admirals. Okay. So that brings in the question of politicization of the armed forces leadership.
Yep.
Because once that happens, you're leaving the door open to lobbying, aligning yourself with a certain political party or government in order to gain from it after retirement. And I'm not saying this happens. I'm saying you are now opening yourself up to these charges. These charges will happen to you. And that kind of thing. Now, even at the chiefs level, Dev, I'm sure all chiefs and their professional code of conduct and their professional, the traditional way they carry themselves, they cannot, even if they have political opinions, express them in public. They don't even express them in private. Forget about public. They don't even express them in private. They are most professional. But all of them have, I'm sure all chiefs will have a, this is a correct decision, this is not a correct decision, even if but they have to follow it. But I'm just saying that politicization has never so far, reached a kind of damaging level as far as, a chain of command, command and control, civil military relationships are concerned. India, has a big fight on its hands as far as China is concerned. So these things can be problematic if they become a big deal. But I don't think so far anything of that kind has happened.
Yeah, right. We'll circle back now again to General VK Singh and what Shiv was talking about now about the promotion aspect, because there's a very controversial aspect to that as well when it comes to General VK Singh. But we'll do that after a quick break.
After being there for 1.5 hours.
Yeah,
that's
after
also
being there for 1.5 hours. Yeah. So one, the fact that there has been intelligence failure. Secondly, sometimes your systems have a laid back attitude. But over here, that was not the case. So the Crocker City Hall, because it's a city hall, because it's an auditorium, has very specific entries and exits.
Okay.
So when the gunmen entered Crocker City Hall, they first killed the guard and then they locked up the door. And then they started with the rampage. Then what happened was that they used their Molotov cocktails and the explosion led to fire, which made the building quite weak.
Ever since he has come to power, Putin, since 1998 as the head of the Federal Security Service, then later as Russia's Prime Minister, then later as President, the country has suffered some 15 terrorist attacks. And almost all have been used by Vladimir Putin to strengthen his grip on power, to, bolster his authority. So if actually Ukraine or the West is behind it, I mean, how is it,
So
benefiting?
Just because a leader uses a terror attack, which happens in many parts of the world, by the way, does not mean that, and I know where it's coming from. It's coming from conspiracy theories that was it orchestrated within rather than without. I don't think an attack such as the Crocus City Hall attack would be the mind of people within only to strengthen power. I think Vladimir Putin today is in such a position that even if he has taken down all his opponents, there has been no voice against him.
True.
He doesn't need this. So when this conspiracy theory is being floated, Anna, you have to ask, does he need it?
Welcome back. Shiv and I are discussing the topic of retired military officers in politics, joining political parties in the context of former Air Force Chief RKS Bhadauria joining the Bharatiya Janata Party. he's not the only military chief to have joined BJP. Before him, there was, like we discussed in the first half of this episode, General VK Singh, who joined the BJP soon after retirement when he was the army chief under the UPA government. I want to talk a bit about VK Singh because I think, like you said at the beginning of this episode, RKS Bhadauria, with him, there's not really much controversy apart from the fact that his name is dragged to the Rafale allegations, none of which again have been proved. Yeah. But with VK Singh, there was a lot of controversy. And I remember this, I think, in my college, if I'm not wrong, and I read, there's lots in the news. The age, like you said, he went to the Supreme Court against his own government. So took his government to the Supreme Court saying that, he should be given 1 more year in office because of his mistaken age records. I also remember that what that would have meant was that the next army chief, I think that was, if I'm not wrong, General Dalbir Suhag, he would not have been able to become the army chief because his General VK Singh's 1 year in office would have disqualified him because I think he was retiring earlier.
It upsets the entire ladder of succession.
It upsets the entire ladder, exactly. So before we go to the other controversy with VK Singh, I want to briefly I want your thoughts on this. Wouldn't this have, pardon my French, but pissed army officers left, right and center? Because Bipin Rawat's deep selection happened a few years later, by the way. So up until then, it was all seniority. So if you have your army chief doing this an attempt where people think, and if I'm not wrong, I think the General Suhag did, I think, mention this at some point that he was not very particularly happy with VK Singh going to the Supreme Court on this issue.
General VK Singh's court case against the UPA government was an extremely polarizing period. And the army is not going to like me saying this, but it divided opinion in a very damaging way in the army because there was a perception within the army that your own chief is going against your own government. He had a case. He had a case and he thought it was worth fighting for. So I'm not going to comment on the merits or demerits of the case. This was a chief. He was fully within his rights to file a case and pursue it. But as far as discipline and command and control within the army, it was perceived as, is this your priority? There was a section, those who, there was very much polarization in the army over this issue because, authority, civilian authority over the military is a mantra. Is a democratic principle as far as India is concerned, and it has never been negotiable. Now, I'm not saying that was under question here, but for an army chief to sue his own government on an issue over his age, which would have basically meant that he gets a year longer. He always said it's not a question of an extension. That's not my issue at all. It's about doing what's right and, making sure that my records reflect correctly as far as my tenure is concerned. But like you said, it would have upset the succession. That was actually secondary to, the kind of divisions that were created within the army. The way the media described it, there was a VK Singh camp. There was his coterie, those people who were behind him, and then there were those who stood to lose, quote unquote, lose from him winning the case and therefore upsetting that succession. Now remember, military personnel, and we always salute military personnel, I respect them, but within a system which is so rigidly structured around, for the first half of your career, timed promotions, and then certain criteria, annual confidential reports, and this kind of thing, very, very Excel sheet career, you mentally become like that. Saying, अच्छा 3 साल के बाद in August ये vacancy खुलेगा. They're able to think like that. Military personnel, especially at the higher level, beyond brigadier, when they become major generals, they can actually foresee vacancies where, Shillong, Eastern Command, that's going to happen in April 2018.
Wow.
And by that time, Air Commodore so-and-so will have become an Air Vice Marshal, and uske baad he'll have this, and then he'll be eligible to become the Eastern Commander. They're able to think like that. I'm just giving you a very silly example, but they're able to think like that. Now, as a result of that ability to think like that and kind of paint a picture in your mind of how things will change if VK Singh gets that 1 year extra, it stood to damage a lot of people's careers, starting from chief downwards. Now remember that if you know who the next chief is going to be, many people have already started aligning their careers, saying, great, hamara regiment ka hai, or this, or someone I know, or I've worked with him in this posting or that posting. I'm just a very human aspect of the military I'm giving you. There's nothing unprofessional about this. It doesn't affect operations. This doesn't affect conduct. And so what VK Singh was doing stood to, like you rightly said, piss off a lot of people. So it was damaging in that sense. It kind of distracted the army. There was no impact of it. It did not impact operations. It did not impact discipline in any way. But the perception was, your own army chief is going against the government and doing this. And just to add to a couple of two examples, because it's important to give people a sense of history as well, because we're talking about this kind of intersection. Not very many people have joined political parties in the past. There are two notable examples. Many lieutenant generals and 3-star and 2-star downwards have joined political parties. Major General BC Khanduri was a very popular BJP leader from Uttarakhand. Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, the hero of 1971, the man in the famous surrender photograph with General A.K. Niazi, the 71 surrender photograph in Dhaka. He retired in the 1970s. He joined the Akali Dal in the 80s after the 84 riots, and he became a Rajya Sabha MP. You have Lieutenant General Deepinder Singh Hooda, who was a northern commander during the surgical strikes of 2016. He didn't join the Congress party, but he was the chairman of the Congress Task Force on National Security for the 2019 election. So, these kinds of General Shankar Roy Chaudhary, who was army chief, he joined the CPM. He became a Rajya Sabha MP for the Communist Party. So there are these stray examples of people who've taken a full plunge. General J.J. Singh, after his governorship in Arunachal Pradesh, joined the Akali Dal. So all of these examples are there of people who've taken the plunge into political parties. But General VK Singh, the reason why it's a kind of flashpoint name as far as this subject is concerned is because of how much happened in that very brief period.
Yep.
And now he's had a 10-year stint as minister, union minister. And his road has ended with this government. He's been dropped from the Ghaziabad Lok Sabha seat. That's been given to someone else. So we don't know yet what next for General VK Singh. He said, I'm going to continue to serve and serve the people, etc. We don't know in what capacity or why he's been dropped. But he's had a 10-year run as a frontline politician.
Yeah, and a pretty good one at that, by the way.
Absolutely.
I know he might feel, if he's listening to this podcast, that we are unnecessarily targeting him. But, unfortunately, it is what it is. We are people of the news and we are discussing
But we're not
news.
even targeting him because like I said, and let me bring in one small little rule. In the military, as a chief, once you retire, or I think it's Lieutenant General, 3-star and 4-star level. So Lieutenant Generals and Generals level, and equivalent in the Navy and Air Force. Once you retire, there's a 2-year cooling off period to join any corporate.
Right. Yes.
Because of conflict of interest issues, especially armed, defense companies, etc. You can't join any corporate immediately. And if you do, you have to get a express waiver from the government or the Ministry of Defense. And that's very rarely given. It's never, I don't know of any example of it being given. But there is no cooling off period for joining a political party. And there is certainly no cooling off period for getting a government assignment like a governorship or an ambassadorship. Why should you need a thing? You're just straight out of the military. You are anyway a government servant as a military officer. You're just getting a new assignment after military retirement. But joining a political party also is a bit of a grey area because there's no cooling off period there. So technically speaking, VK Singh or Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria or the current chiefs or any chief, they can join Congress, BJP, CPM, whatever they want, the day after they retire. It's not illegal. It's just questionable.
Questionable, yeah.
I mean, are you willing to deal with that? You've made your entire life about honor and being, beyond reproach and, above criticism. Would you actually risk that? So which is why in VK Singh's case also, he joined the BJP 2 years later as with Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria, 2 years after the retirement.
Right. One last point on VK Singh and then we'll move forward. Let's talk about the story. I don't know if you were in the Indian Express in 2012, if I'm not wrong. The three-deck headline that I can still picture because it was such a sensation across the country.
Oh, the coup.
Yeah, the coup. The story that that in their defense, in Shekhar Gupta's, and I think it was Ritu Sareen and one more reporter in their defense, they did not even write the word coup once in the entire story. But I think that was the issue. I remember back then as well that I read the entire damn thing and I thought that the story on its own was completely fine, but the presentation, the three-deck headline, the big photo, the entire front page, perhaps that was what led to all the buzz. So before I take this question forward, because there is a serious question where I'm going to ask you to talk a bit about the history of the Indian and Pakistani armies and the very different tangents, the completely different paths they took. But before we come to that, your thoughts on that story, and because the story, if for our listeners and viewers, was basically saying that two army units located near Delhi had moved towards Delhi, towards the city of Delhi, and caught the Ministry of Defense unawares. They were apparently not clued into their plans. The army said it's a training exercise, routine exercise, etc. But the Ministry of Defense was so taken aback that apparently Delhi police was asked to put up barricades on the highways leading up to the city to kind of slow down the movement of those two units. The implication of the story was that, and this, by the way, was happening right when General VK Singh, who was then the army chief, was having his fight with the UPA government over the date of birth issue. So the implication was basically this was some sort of like a show of strength to kind of show the government its place. The army kept saying, the Ministry of Defense till date says that it was just a training exercise and it's XYZ. Former Congress Minister Manish Tiwari, who was, I think, on some defense panel during that time, had later in 2016 or 17 said that story may just have been right. I don't know what's the truth. I don't know if you were an Express back then. This was by your former boss, Shekhar Gupta. Your thoughts on the story first before we move on to the second part.
So this was 2012. So I was actually in India Today itself. Okay. And India Today TV was in those days called Headlines Today. I will never forget the day that story came out. Because I was not in Delhi, I was in Visakhapatnam, standing on a submarine dock right next to the INS Chakra nuclear submarine from Russia, which was being commissioned into the Indian Navy that day. So a bunch of us defense correspondents had been flown to Visakhapatnam by the Indian Navy the previous day. So we were there for the night. And the next day, early in the morning, we were at the dock for the commissioning ceremony. And that's when the news about this story started trickling in for all of us while we were there. And it was a little bewildering because we were standing in front of a nuclear submarine, a fabulous defense story, which was going to be a page one story no matter what. And this nuclear bomb had dropped on the front page of the Indian Express far away in Delhi. And the shockwaves were being felt everywhere. So even the sad irony of that afternoon, that morning was this amazing Akula submarine is being commissioned into service, and we're all on our phones checking with the office, checking with our sources, checking with the army, for reactions and, basically tracking the fallout of this absolutely unbelievable bombshell of a story. Now, if you remember it correctly, it was a full front page story by Shekhar Gupta and his team of Ritu Sareen, etc. First of all, these are people who've been former colleagues. Shekhar Gupta was my former boss. All absolutely top-class journalists, Ritu Sareen and the others who had a byline in that story. Shekhar Gupta, of course, took the lead byline because he knew that the kind of heat that the story is going to generate. So he very, gallantly took the sole byline. But there were other people whose names were also attached to that story. Now, General VK Singh, and justifiably so, was furious with that story and ever since that time he's called General Shekhar Gupta Kuta, right? So all these horrible words and stuff came out, and I don't blame him at all for being so viciously angry with Shekhar Gupta, because to blame an army chief of planning a coup against their government is like shooting your parents in front of you. Okay, it goes so against the entire ethos of what you have worked your entire career for, that it is beyond blasphemy. It's beyond sacrilege to be accused of that kind of thing. The reason why the story got a lot of traction is because of how vitiated the atmosphere was at that time between the government and General VK Singh. Now, if you're asking me personally, is there any truth to the story? I think it's bullshit. I don't think there was a coup. The way the Indian military is structured, we are not Pakistan, first of all. Okay, geographically, demographically, in terms of command and control, in terms of spread, etc. There, a coup is like not such a big deal. Here, it would be. I'm talking about even in terms of logistics, it would not be possible.
Yep.
Okay, and we're too chaotic a country, to have something as hard hitting as a coup. It's not going to happen. So having put that aside, I do not believe the story at all. I don't think that's true at all. I've studied the various moving parts of the story. The mechanized units that were moving from Agra to Manesar or wherever. It's rubbish. These things happen all the time. I think it is more symptomatic of the amount of distrust that existed between the army chief and the government, which was actually very, very dangerous. To have that kind of distrust meant that that link between the civilian leadership and your army chief, for God's sake, your army chief had gone beyond a point of no return, where something like this could be given credence, by people in authority. And the sources for this story had to be people in government and the intelligence agencies and stuff, right? It also points out, Dev, in my view, to the eagerness of the government of the day, the UPA government that time, to discredit VK Singh. Okay, VK Singh had turned out to be a very a huge nuisance for the UPA government. It made them look not in control of the army. It made them look vulnerable. I mean, a general humko court mein ghaseet raha hai yaar. A general has dragged us to court. How stupid do we look? And remember, this was a government that was bruised and battered from the whole Anna Hazare affair in 2011. And in 2012, they're dealing with their own army chief. So this was a government that was, spoiling for a fight. They were like fed up with all these people attacking us and, trying to push us out of office. So they were really pissed off. They were not in a good mood at all. So I think all this, that terrible trust deficit, that sense of anger that was brewing on both sides, and the eagerness for the government to paint VK Singh as a, unpredictable, volatile villain, all of these things kind of mix into this very sort of heady cocktail of toxicity, which resulted in multiple sources kind of painting this picture over these units moving and making it seem like a coup. I frankly don't believe it at all. Very, very credible people, Dave, I can tell you. Credible people, friends, have all told me, no, there is something to it. Nahi, kuch to tha. He wanted to spook the government. There was no intention of a coup, but it was an intention to just poke them a little bit, saying, like kind of saber rattling a little bit, just flexing a little military muscle and giving them a little bit of sleepless nights. I don't buy that, because that's a very, very dangerous thing to do.
Yep.
And no matter how... what kind of emotional state both sides were on, taking a decision of that kind is, like I said, it's like deciding to really go against your own country. It's a very, very difficult decision. It can never happen here. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that it can never happen here, because this is a phrase that I have read about loads by defense journalists like you, when it comes to the idea of a military dictatorship in India, a coup in India. Every journalist like you is very emphatic that there is something, this is just unthinkable, ho nahi sakta. Which is why I want you to actually tell us then what happened in history. What was it that maybe Nehru did, right? Because I don't want to compare us to Pakistan or the Indian army to the Pakistan army, but the genesis of both the armies is the same, the British and Indian army. There was partition and the British army is divided to one half went to Pakistan, the other half came to India. I mean half literally, but you get my point. In the years after partition, also had them staffed by British officers because the Indian and respective Pakistani officers had not really risen up the ranks yet, right? So you have two armies born from the same common army, two countries, yet the paths are completely opposite. You have the Indian army, which, like you said, prides itself on the fact that it is completely away from politics. The idea of a coup, the idea of the serving military chief getting involved in politics is impossible. You cannot think, unfathomable. Whereas in Pakistan, you have the military literally involved in the day-to-day politics over there. You see what's happening even right now as we speak. So what was it? You must have studied both the armies. So where do you think that this divergence between the two armies happened, and what was it that India did right to ensure that?
One of the great differences between India and Pakistan is in India, the army is an organ of government. In Pakistan, the government is an organ of the army, right? And that's been the truth since partition. Now, the reason, you're absolutely right. Both the armies came from the same mothership, the same British regimental system, etc. The reason why the two armies kind of inherited different legacies is because, first of all, the two countries were birthed very differently. One country was birthed as a secular democracy, etc. The other country was birthed as a demarcated religious country, where very soon after independence, the kind of political chaos that took over in Pakistan meant that the army was progressively imbued by the sitting governments of that day with progressively more and more powers. It didn't happen overnight. It's not like the army just decided to grab power in Pakistan and that's how it's already been. The army gradually, because there were no, there was no strong leadership post Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and there was a couple of decades of a void before Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and the others, came in, and we had so many military dictators, Ayub Khan and Yahya Khan and all the rest of those jokers. But there was a real political void to such an extent that the intersection of military and government kind of merged them together, which is why you had heads of state who were generals. You had heads of states like Yahya Khan and Ayub Khan and others who were in the military and governing the country. So that legacy, starting from the 50s and 60s, the legacy of military rule of a country, which was seen by and remember that these military rules were not imposed on the country. It's not like the Pakistani people were oppressed and the army was put in. The people were like trusting the army, saying, "No, these politicians don't know how to run the country. You guys do it." So once that happened and the army had assumed for itself, the kind of political connective tissue and muscle to run the country, they never went back. So even now, the Pakistan army is not just a military force. It is the governing authority of the country, which is why you see all these, you see this circus of Imran Khan and Shehbaz Sharif and Nawaz Sharif and all these people come. But the people who really ran the show were people like General Musharraf and Ayub Khan and all these people. So the chaos that you're seeing in Pakistan right now is unprecedented. But it's all a kind of compounding symptom of how things began after independence. With India, the emphasis, and let's give credit to the country's founding fathers and mothers and the structures they gave our country, the constitutional kind of clarity that it gave how the country is structured, the various arms of the government are structured, were very, very important as far as the armed forces, the military-civilian relationship was concerned. And this is something that often gets missed, Dev, when we talk about the difference between India and Pakistan. Look at the size of Pakistan and look at the size of India. Just geographically think of the kind of challenge it is for India with its huge subcontinental size, and Pakistan, which is a small percentage the size of India. So affecting any kind of power, imposing any kind of control in a country, Pakistan is not small, but I'm saying compared to India, is nothing compared to what it would be in India. But geography isn't the only reason. It's also about that constitutional genesis of how a country is. It's a sense of a nation. It's a sense of democratic principles. It's about the primacy of your civilian leadership. Those were principles that were very, very strong right from the start. From Nehru to Indira Gandhi to all these people, you had towering leaders with towering stature who didn't leave a void like the kind of void of the 50s and 60s that was there in Pakistan. And that's the reason why this didn't happen. And I'm not saying if you didn't have these leaders, there would be, army control or military. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying a combination of all these factors meant that the army's role in society and in government and in the nation was well understood. It was well respected. It was totally entrenched, and the army knew exactly what its space was for.
Right. One last point as we bring this episode to a close is the conflict, or not say conflict, but the intersection of politics and military affairs when you are in the military. I'll take the example of the Agniveer scheme. But Agniveer, I think, is perhaps not the best example because it became a political issue after it was implemented. I think when it was implemented, it was more of an economic military decision. So I think let's skip that. But let's talk about the idea of shedding colonial baggage. Some people, I think rightfully so, have linked it to BJP's nationalism pitch, that this is what this party is all about. They want to do away with, English names, usko Hindi kar dena hai, etc., etc., etc. And you've had the military involved in some. So you have, I think, the Navy saying that it will be doing away with some of its lower ranks and changing them to Indian names. And I think you also have new sort of dress codes for, I'm not sure which event, but some event. They have so many uniforms, so I'm confused. But they're Indian kurtas, basically, kurta pajamas, essentially. Completely fine with that, by the way. I don't think there's an issue with that. You had the naval insignia recently being changed. I think when the INS Vikrant was launched, if I'm not wrong.
With the Chhatrapati Dhwaj.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I think nothing wrong with that. But you have people linking that to a particular political party, and then by extension you will have that being linked to a particular military chief. The reason I said Agniveer, even though I did not expand on that, was I think one of the military army chief who was in office then, later on in a book has said that he was not in agreement with that idea, which to me sounded a bit like, hello, then you should have told the government back then. I mean, you were the army chief for all that, for God's sake. Anyway, so how do you see the intersection of military affairs and a bit of politics? Because not all, most of it is purely military, I'm pretty sure, but there will be some elements of politics to it, because I'm pretty sure a particular political party will have a particular military ideology which they'd want their current military chiefs to follow.
Now, so first of all, you're absolutely right, Dave, that the Indian military system is a legacy of the British, from our ranks to our regiments, most of our regiments, to the way they're structured, the way most things work. Of course, there have been modifications for the Indian condition, but it's largely the British system, right? Now, without getting into whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, let's first discuss why it's happening. Now, the BJP, the Modi government, is on a civilizational mission. Okay, this is no longer about government, and I'm not saying this is either good or bad. I'm just saying let's understand what the BJP is trying to do with these things, because because like you said, the debate about this is, why is the government tinkering with these things in the military? Let it be the way it is. These are legacy, traditional issues. Why should we tinker with ranks of soldiers or sailors and the Navy flag, etc.? Rehne do yaar, ye to, why is the government getting into all this? The government feels that these are things that it needs to do in order to sort of craft a new image for India. They believe that India needs to, when we say shed colonial baggage, boy, is this government taking that stuff seriously. Okay, so whether it comes to the kurta pajama mess hall attire is an optional attire for the Navy in their messes. It's not mandatory. They still can wear their old uniforms as well. The flag of David has been replaced with the Shivaji Dhwaj in the Navy's official flag. Similarly, certain ranks are going to be chief petty officer and things like that, which are of British origin, are all going to be changed. We don't know what those are, but hopefully they won't be complicated Sanskritized names, but they will be some Indianized kind of names. Now, it may seem very jarring because of military culture having always been very regimented, very devoted to order, very devoted to a certain kind of way of doing things, being totally non-negotiable with the order of things and how they have always been, tradition, how it's been handed down over the many decades and centuries. Those things mean a lot in the military. Now, any kind of change of these non-negotiables, ranks, insignias, war cries, names of regiments, uniforms are all difficult things to digest for an organization that does not change in a dime. It takes decades to change things in the military. And for good reason, because that order is what defines how operationally effective they are. Those are the things they can depend on. They can depend on those ranks being the same. They can depend on the uniform being the same. They can depend on what they are being called. They can depend on what their regiment war cry is. And I'm just taking examples. So when those things start to change, it's always going to kick up a certain amount of dust. That is from the military perspective. The government's perspective is that, look, whether it is the military, whether it is the ministries, whether it is how people dress in India, whether it is, tearing down the Pragati Maidan and building something called a Bharat Mandapam. They believe that everything is interconnected in a larger kind of civilizational mission, where they believe that India ka time aa gaya hai. This is India's time, and a country of India's stature, Naya Bharat as it were, shouldn't have to have, old colonial trappings. Whether it is the flag of David, whether it is things like Chief Petty Officer, or whether it is any kind of British anything, anywhere, it should be done away with, because this is not a past we should, that should, define any part of our public life right now. That's the government's mission. Their thing is, ye to karna hi hai. So whether it is your Clive Road, or all your British named roads and stuff, the renaming is a completely separate thing, which is also controversial. But I'm just saying that while it is very much a vibrant debate over whether you should be tinkering with these things which have been, untouched for so long, the government is like, no, this is a new nation. Ye Naya Bharat hai. Naye log aayenge military mein. So we have to start it afresh with a brand new identity. Who said that the British legacy has to be our legacy? We will let this be 0.0 of a new military legacy for India. That's what this is about.
Yeah, right. Last point, trivia question. You mentioned this during the episode we did on the CDS and General Bipin Rawat, the infamous Uttarakhand lobby. The reason I asked that is when you said that during the episode, I did not, think much about it. I was like, theek hai, kuch hoga, theek hai. But I walked out, and I think one of my colleagues asked me, kis pe recording kiya aaj? So I said, ki Bipin Rawat, etc. His father is a retired army officer. And he is from Uttarakhand, my colleague. So he said, very matter-of-factly, Bipin Rawat is a product of, मैं बताता हूँ तुमको, he's a product of this thing called Uttarakhand lobby. It's a coterie of officers, bureaucrats and military officers that ensure only Uttarakhandi officers get the top posts. Dowal ho gaya aapka, Bipin Rawat ho gaya, and so on and so forth. I was like, man, if this guy is feeling so, because he's from, his father is a retired officer, I'm pretty sure ghar pe kafi baat hua hoga. So I need to ask Shiv about this the next time I get a chance. So this is a good episode to ask you about it, since we're discussing politics. Does this so-called lobby exist, and if it does, what does it do?
Look, I'll be very frank with you. All chiefs at one point or the other have been accused of being part of lobbies. And usually these lobbies are defined by which state they are from, or which caste they are from, or which which regiment they belong to. So it can be a Rajput regiment lobby. With General VK Singh, his critics said he has surrounded himself with people from the, with Rajputs, people from the Rajput caste. Some of my old tweets, making sarcastic comments about those from 2012 have been pulled out by people and said, "Arey, dekho, Shiv kya bol raha tha." And they were never meant with disrespect. Those were just things that his critics were saying. And I've always had the greatest respect. I know General VK Singh. I've interviewed him many times. So there's nothing like that. But I'm just saying that perception has been there ki lobby hai. Ki chiefs surround themselves with people who they are familiar with, from their regiment or from their state. So this Uttarakhand lobby became a thing. When A.K. Antony was defense minister, Mallu lobby was there. There was a Mallu lobby. Bong lobby was there when Pranab was the defense minister. So these things are these. Look, ultimately, it's the way things roll.
Yeah.
Okay, and either it can be subtle or it can be glaringly obvious. With the case with General Bipin Rawat, there were multiple officers. The Doval is from Uttarakhand, many others who were from Uttarakhand, and so and anyway, General Bipin Rawat, having been handpicked by the government over certain others, had no shortage of critics and people who were not well-wishers. Let me put it that way, within the system. So they painted that image of him surrounding himself with or benefiting from this so-called Uttarakhand lobby. So these things will always happen in any competitive organization. That someone will find a way to paint a lobby around you.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And when it comes to about keeping people you're comfortable with close to you, I mean, obviously, if I'm giving a different project tomorrow, for example, कि देव तुम आज से website नहीं कुछ और देखोगे, I'll obviously take the people I know who are good workers, who I know I can, they match my tuning and I can work better with them versus somebody who's completely new. So I'm guessing it maybe comes from that.
But you'll be in a lot less trouble if you did this in the army.
True, that is true. Great, Shiv. Once again, great chat, fun chat. And like we said, the topic is such that I think we were expecting, the two of us were expecting it to be a fun episode. And I think it has turned out to be that. But we'll let our viewers and listeners be the final judge. So do let us know in the comments below if you're watching us on YouTube, what you thought of this episode. And if you have any topics that you want us to discuss. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can WhatsApp us at 8588 966 996. Thanks as always to our producer Anna Priyadarshini. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries with our passport. Bye-bye.